Do our police and intelligence services have the people, the resources, the legislation and the technology to seek out and prevent such acts? While these heinous acts were carried out by an individual, there can be no doubt that he had sympathetic associates, certainly online and possibly offline. How do we combat this in an age of social media and increasing technological challenges? These questions and others need to be asked of government agencies, individuals, companies, public commentators and numerous other groups. The formal investigations into these events need to be thorough, open and honest. National will play a constructive role in this and in overhauling New Zealand's firearm laws. Now, no one can understand why anyone needs military-styled semi-automatic weapons for recreational use. In addition, let's see New Zealand re-evaluate the boundaries of acceptable social and political discussion. Our resolve now should be to take every opportunity to push against extremism, to call out hate and fear when we see it, and to stand up to the vile ideologies that exist to spread hate, fear, mistrust and lies. Mr. Speaker, as is always the case, when tragic, evil acts occur, we see an immediate counterweight of bravery and compassion. Christchurch has been no exception. Both civilians and law and order professionals immediately showed superhuman courage in the face of rapidly unfolding, extremely frightening and unprecedented in this land events. Medical professionals have worked non-stop since to save lives in truly horrific circumstances. I, like our Prime Minister, want to pay tribute to the New Zealand Police, the ambulance services, the Red Cross, our Defence Force, healthcare workers and the vast range of volunteers who have done so much to try and soften the brutal blow since Friday. While in Christchurch, I met with a young police officer. I know his family very well. He was one of the first responders on the day of the shootings. He was emotional as he told me about what it was like that day. He's been a policeman for 6 years, but he said no amount of training or experience could have prepared him for what he and his colleagues faced that day. No one could be. All of those who were working that day will never forget what they saw. To everyone who was responded on the ground in Christchurch, thank you. You are heroes. New Zealand owes you a debt of gratitude.
The Right Honourable Winston Peters.
We acknowledge the Prime Minister speaks for the coalition government, and indeed because of that we would have preferred not to rise and speak, but that should not in any way be construed as giving consent or licence to the obscene act perpetrated against innocent worshippers last Friday at Linwood and Dean's Ave mosques in Christchurch. The sickening scourge of terrorism imported to Christchurch was the work of a coward who we reject. That is what we must all say. We rise today in support of the victims of the violent attacks of March 15. The Muslim community in Christchurch and elsewhere have our deepest sympathies for their profound sense of loss and grief. In a country like ours that practices religious tolerance, an attack on one of us peacefully observing their beliefs is an attack on all of our beliefs. Friday, March 15, 2019 is the day everything changed in our country, a day when someone from outside our shores attempted to terrorise us and tear us apart. That, we believe, was his objective, and he has failed. Why? Because violent extremism, whatever its origin or form or creed, is utterly rejected by New Zealanders. His creed, like extremists anywhere and everywhere, seeks only to destroy. It's evil and it's destructive. The Pakistani Foreign Minister, when expressing his country's sympathies for New Zealand, told me that 77,000 people in his country had died from terrorist-related violence in Pakistan's recent history. He truly understood how New Zealanders feel. And we've had a number of messages in similar vein from Muslim countries all around the world. New Zealand is not alone, yet the terrorist formula always remains the same. Whenever terror strikes, it seeks to create or provoke fear and panic. But in New Zealand, it has failed. It has failed because our thoughts are not the terrorist's thoughts, and his ways are not our ways. Because New Zealanders believe in a fair go. We are a practical people. We're a tolerant people. We aren't scared to lift our heads above the parapet and express our values to the world. And we have the ability to reflect upon ourselves and how others see us, so we know how to get along with each other. While everything else may have changed on March 15, New Zealand's essential character has not and will not. One lesson that we've learned from this national tragedy is that our firearms laws are not fit for purpose, which is why the government is committed to fixing them up. But that's for tomorrow. Today is a day to pay our respects to the grieving families of Christchurch, and we here in this Parliament stand with them and the people of that city. Once more their lives have been massively disrupted. Once more we see their remarkable resilience. They have suffered more over the past decade than we can say. The people of Christchurch will stay in our thoughts as they reclaim their city. As they and the rest of us rebuild, we must remember that only by drawing on our strengths as a people will we prevail against the malevolent forces of intolerance and hate. That is what we must do. Can I close by acknowledging the calm and comforting leadership of the Prime Minister during this moment of national tragedy. Her clarity, empathy and unifying leadership is helping to guide the country through this massive test of our resolve. We will follow that example.
Marama Davidson.
Mr Speaker, tēnā tātou. Ka tika me whai whakaro kia rātou, kua kapohia e ngā ringa tauwhiro o Aitua. Kua pōhara haere tō tātou nei whenua taurikura, tō tātou nei ao i tō koutou ngarohanga atu. Nō reira, kia koutou kua wheturangitia, kia koutou kua hoi i o koutou waka wairua ki tō tātou kaihanga i te wāhi ngaro. Hoia, hoia, hoia atu rā. Ka mihia rātou e tangi atu rā, koutou e tangi mai nā tātou e tangi atu nei. Huri noa kia koutou katoa e noho pani ana, e noho kirimate ana, e noho pauri ana. Kei konei mātou, hei pau aroha, hei pau aki aki, hei pau tautoko, mā koutou katoa. Mr Speaker, I acknowledge the lives cruelly taken and badly injured in our Muslim community by a terrorist attack driven by hatred. We are holding deep love for your families and loved ones and your entire Muslim communities. We are holding deep love for the city of Christchurch and all of us who are hurting and are angry. You were praying. You were in the most profoundly peaceful state of harmony and compassion that a human can be in. You were with your children, your elders, your partners and siblings, your friends and your closest loved ones. You were anchored in the collective love of your community, the collective practice of your sacred traditions, under the shelter of your sacred place of worship. Your families have been ripped apart, your hearts broken, your wairua destroyed. As artist Ruby Alice Rose drew, This is your home. You should have been safe here. I know that we must work together, all of us, to become an Aotearoa where everyone is safe to pray or not, an Aotearoa where people are safe to be who they are. Manaaki and tika, caring for each other in a upholding with every inch of ourselves. Upholding my mana, my dignity, is connected to upholding your mana, your dignity. I am as passionate about the well-being of your tamariki, your children, as I am about making sure my children are okay and have everything they need. These are the values we should be upholding with every inch of our being. This spirit of connection is how we will stay together and bring everyone with us. I also acknowledge the calls from those in Muslim communities to ensure that we tell the truth right from the start. I note the Muslim voices highlighting the truth that New Zealand has a long history of colonial policy, discourse and violence that sought to harm Indigenous peoples. As tangata whenua, I am aware that we need to build connections now more than ever to heal and to create loving futures for everyone. I was privileged to sit with the elders at the Al Mustafa Jamia Masjid Mosque in Otahuhu on Sunday. I shared with them the story of Parihaka and the violent Crown invasion into a peaceful community and the recognition work that has begun because of our acknowledgement. They were grateful for the knowing of something they hadn't known before. These are the bridges that we can build. Mr. Speaker, we must never again ignore or contribute to anti-Islamic hatred as part of the rise of white supremacy and extreme white right ideology. As one young Muslim woman said, we've now lost lives, so I think it's time that we started having the uncomfortable conversations. The agenda that drove this violence wants to harm many other communities, Jewish communities, Sikh communities, Buddhist followers, people of colour communities, brown immigrants and refugees, tangata whenua and Pacific peoples, women and disabled peoples, and many others. I know the Muslim community tried to tell us these truths of the dangers that you faced and felt. We did not protect you. We will do better. I am pleased that we will support the Prime Minister and the programme across this House to ensure that we strengthen the systems and the gun laws that we have responsibility for. So what do we do now? I am energised by the signs of people now reflecting on their own bias and prejudice and committing to fighting racism with all their might. I was asked to talk today about the hate that Muslim women wearing scarves receive just going about their lives. I was asked to acknowledge stories like Muslim women doctors receiving abuse from the very people they are caring for because of their headscarves. I want us all to commit to never accepting racism and bigotry from anyone in our beautiful country. We know that people in your Muslim community need to know, as that rightful anger is harboured, we need to let you know that we hear you, that we get it. We know that you need to feel and see and hear that we have got your back, that we will do all we can to prevent this and protect you so that you aren't left alone with that burden in your rightful anger. We need to create an inclusive world where no one feels excluded, so that no individual or group feels that the only choice they have left is to grab a weapon. How do we find safe avenues for people's humanity to shine through rather than their fear? It is time for us all to reflect. It is time to understand that words matter. I acknowledge that today there is not one Muslim voice in this House. It is time to understand whose voices need to be put first. I acknowledge that the Muslim communities will choose how they grieve, and that we cannot put our expectations on what emotions that might include. I also acknowledge the essential leadership role that tangata whenua have in taking us forward together in bridging with our communities. I want to end with thanks to all those who responded so bravely on Friday, to the police who put themselves in the line of fire to prevent further deaths, to all the ambulance paramedics who rushed to save lives, to all the nurses, doctors and hospital staff who rapidly treated the wounded and continued to look after the survivors, to all the people standing on the street who did all they could to support those in need. I want to thank the teachers and staff who looked after our tamariki and had to deal with the lockdown and keep children feeling safe and not confused. There were librarians who comforted people in the Central City Library, to everyone who held each other while their city felt under attack, to all those who continue to provide a warm embrace and a shoulder to cry on. You inspire me. You are the hope that we can have to make a real change. And I want to thank the Prime Minister. Her calm and strong leadership in one of the most harrowing situations that a Prime Minister could ever face is deeply appreciated. We know that the communities directly affected are incredibly grateful. We are all grateful. Kia kaha, Jacinda Ardern. We have a big shift ahead of us. We have lessons to learn. We have conversations to have. It's just, Mr. Speaker, that this seems like it was too big a price to pay to get us to this point. In closing, to our Muslim communities, we love you not just because you are us, but because you are you. Kia ora.
Speaker David Seymour. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise on behalf of the ACT Party to join with other leaders in offering the victims condolence and the perpetrator condemnation. I extend not just to those who were attacked, but to every Muslim New Zealander, our sympathy, but also our solidarity. It is important that that solidarity is comprehensive. So let us close ranks around the cherished values of our country. Let me adopt from the opposite end of our political spectrum the words of our Prime Minister. We grieve together, we are one, they are us. Normally in New Zealand, all the bad news is in the world section of our newspapers. How could it be that our country is supplying bad news to the papers of the world? It is tempting to say that we have changed forever. Well, cold comfort it may be, but one of our darkest days has also shed light on our true character. Up and down this country have opened up seemingly bottomless wells of love and strength. I'd like to pay tribute to those first responders, including the very first responders who heroically confronted the terrorist practically unarmed. I hope that the Crown suitably recognises you. To those who followed up, the police, the medics, hospital staff, teachers, this Parliament thanks you for your service. To those who have held vigils, created memes of affirmation, left flowers and donated millions of dollars to show the warmth and resilience of our communities. Please allow me a small amount of disagreement then with those who say our country has changed forever. Changing New Zealand was the terrorists' objective. Changing New Zealand dishonours the victims by letting him win. The values that we've seen expressed over the past several days are the same ones that are recorded in our country's founding document for almost 180 years. That we and what we treasure should be safe from harm, that we have equal rights and duties. The inherent rights to safety and equal treatment of every individual in this country has been recorded more fully in our Bill of Rights. It is worth remembering what that bill guarantees. Among its promises are the right not to be deprived of life, to freedom of thought, conscience and religion, freedom of expression, freedom of peaceful assembly, and freedom of association and movement. One of them is worth quoting at length: manifestation of religion and belief. Every person has the right to manifest that person's religion or belief in worship, observance, practice or teaching, either individually or in community with others, and either in public or private. The terrorist may not like it, but this country has shown, and this Parliament is showing, that we will never dishonour the victims by backing down from our fervent belief in these freedoms for all of us. But let us also remember the words of the Canadian author Naomi Klein, who warned in her shock doctrine that in moments of crisis people can be willing to hand over a great deal of power. It is important that we maintain our tradition of sober, robust lawmaking at all times, but especially now. Clearly, there are policy issues that must be addressed. Some of them have already been raised today, and they relate to gun laws, to speech and social media, and the performance of the security and intelligence services. It is critical that we get these issues right, that any changes are relevant to and effective at solving the problems that have been so nakedly laid bare in the past 4 days. It would be a shame to fall for the old fallacy that we must do something, this is something, so let's do this thing. On the issue of security intelligence in particular, we need to know how it is possible that what has happened, and what might be done to prevent it from happening again. Given it involves the performance of government agencies, I cannot see how the issue arising could be visited by anything less than a Royal Commission reporting to the Governor-General at arm's length from the government of the day. The same could be said for this House and the government's existing schedule. I hope that critical policy issues will be given time to be properly ventilated through the usual processes. Giving all current submission and report dates a fortnight's stay as a rule of thumb, I believe, would be an excellent gesture. Suffice it to say, this Parliament stands ready to assist in getting the policy response to the terror tragedy right. It must be a high-quality response in keeping with the underlying values of our country. The best way to show defiance is to refuse to erode our free society. But so much for those future challenges. For now, let us honour the heroes, console those who have lost, and commemorate those who were lost. As a touching image shared by many on the internet and already touched upon in this debate concludes, I say to the victims, this is your home. You should have been safe here.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister in reply.
Mr. Speaker, I conclude by acknowledging the statements made within this House. I acknowledge the grief that has been expressed directly and on behalf of communities, and I acknowledge the representation of those communities in the gallery here today. The discussion, the words here have been honest, they have been direct, they have been focused on the terrorist attack against our Muslim community, the ideology that surrounded it, and what we must do to prevent it from ever happening again. We are united, as New Zealand is united. But this week, Mr. Speaker, as others have said, is a time for the dignity of those who have passed, support for those who have lost, and comfort for all those who mourn. Mr. Speaker, my final words, I wish to express directly to the women and children of Muslim faith. As I left the mosque I visited on Sunday here in Wellington, a child, a very young boy, called out my name and asked, Prime Minister, will we be safe now? Mr. Speaker, I hear in this House today that we are all collectively committing to telling that young boy a resounding yes, as I told him. And we will do all we can do. We will do everything in our power to ensure that that is the case. Tātou, tātou. Assalamu alaikum. Aroha.
Chris Hipkins.
Mr. Speaker, I seek leave for the House to now adjourn as a mark of respect for those people affected by the Christchurch mosque terror attacks.
Leave has been sought for that course of action. Is there any objection? There is none. The House stands adjourned until 2 p.m. tomorrow.